Just to kick things off and just to get a flavour of kind of what's happening already around getting people prepared, young people with the right skills, can each of you tell me what your organisation or your college or whatever is doing to make sure we have the right students with doing the right stuff and coming out with the right skills? So Andy, do you want to kick us off on that?
Yeah, pleasure. We're based down in the southwest of England, about 10 miles down the road from Hinkley Point C, or the proposed site for Hinkley Point C, and are busy developing new programmes, new courses and new facilities for nuclear new build. So the relationship with EDF Energy has been strong, but also the support from the Tier 1, the potential investors in Hinkley have been strong. We've been focusing on understanding the demand. I could pick an example, such as steel fixing from Langer O'Rourke. A big percentage of the UK's workforce will be required to build Hinkley, so we've developed new qualifications, apprenticeships, training for unemployed, and new facilities in place. So what was ringing true for me from David was the spend now, spend big and invest in skills, and I think there's a real business case behind doing so. And
what's the appetite like from young people or other people who might be interested in these courses? What's that appetite been like?
Well, for many years we've all been working, I'm sure, at trying to promote STEM to young people. I think a big project like Nuclear New Build has captured the interest of our community. I was really pleased to see a group of local happened to be schoolgirls, driving 30-ton dumper trucks through the new EDF investment of a construction skills and innovation centre, and getting behind the wheel of that 30-ton dumper truck and then coming back, and you really felt the enthusiasm. They were suggesting that their peers had laughed at them and suggested they shouldn't join the programme. Why were they going to the college to do this? It seemed a strange thing to do. And one young girl looked me in the eye and said, I'm going to do this. And you really feel that some of the work through the EDF Energy Inspire programme and the activity we're doing is actually making a real difference.
Yeah, John, what about yourself?
The Energy Island programme was set up in 2010 essentially to support developers that will venture with horizon development from a public sector perspective, and to seek to de-risk it as much as we can. At the same time, maximising opportunities for local companies and local people, young people, in terms of employment. And what we're after is a sustainable community at the end of it, rather than a community where I'm the youngest person there. Now then, from our perspective, skills are a devolved responsibility, so that whenever we hear fine words coming out of London regarding apprenticeships and nuclear colleges and so on, we've got to say, sorry, that does not apply in Wales. So part of the task that we have in Energy Island, working in partnership with Horizon, with Hitachi, with Welsh Government and so on, is to ensure that the Welsh offer is joined up with what comes out of London. In terms of what's happening on the ground at the local FE college, Coleg Menai, part of the group Llandrillo Menai organisation in North West Wales, is working in partnership and stealing good ideas from Bridgewater, from Cumbria, and looking to applying those in the locality. We're looking at setting up sort of programs of work with schools on the sort of STEM agenda, building on the good practices of Magnox and their information centre work, and working with Horizon, who are now stepping up to the plate with their schools programme. So from our perspective, it's about encouraging collaboration and joined up working across a myriad of public and private sector organisations in North Wales.
Yeah, Mike.
Gentry is slightly different. We're an employer-owned and led independent training provider. We set up 10 years ago. We are the largest provider of training to the civil nuclear sector, mainly because Sellafield is on the doorstep and there's 10,000 employees, and we provide all the technical and engineering skills support for the site. We started thinking about the new build agenda back in 2012, and we realised our main focus is around, obviously, operations and particularly decommissioning, not just for Sellafield, but a lot of the Tier 1 and Tier 2 firms in the area. And so we looked for an international partner, and we have a partnership with Tecnatom, who have a long track record and history of training nuclear operators and maintainers for the Spanish nuclear fleet, but also in South America, and more latterly they've been working with Westinghouse in terms of AP1000 in China, more recently in America. And so we teamed up with them to look at our capability, the curriculum offer, what were the sort of programs we need to support New Gen at Moorside when it eventually kicks off. And since then, we've partnered with them. We've actually supported Horizon in Gloucester with their nuclear fundamentals programme for their head office staff. We've had colleagues from colleague NIA come, and we're exchanging views and practices with them. But more latterly, we've been investing. We with some government support last year, we brought the first of its type nuclear reactor operator simulator. It's out in the exhibition hall if you want to have a look at it. And that's really all about how do we link education, so the education and nuclear plant operation, with the actual operation of a nuclear plant, based on a real model, a real reactor at Amarath, which is a 3-loop PWR. And finally, what we're starting to do is higher education, because we also deliver higher education programs, and we're looking at a new foundation degree program in nuclear operations. So we're trying to get, it's a common theme, start early. I think we're at the cusp where, working with NewGen, the next stage is to actually ramp up to scale. And I think, scale is something we're all concerned about. David's point entirely, the numbers are absolutely huge. And whilst there's been fantastic work done by EDF with Bridgewater and Horizon now with colleague NI, the numbers still are small. Talking about programs of 30 or 40, and we're talking thousands. And David's absolutely nailed it. The only way we're going to do this from the supply side, we're the education and skills supply chain, is by collaboration and sharing.
Yeah.
And there's enough work to go around, to be honest.
Yeah, David, we've obviously heard what your organisation does. One of the things I'm interested in is I talk to business people all the time. Visited something like 500 businesses over the last few years in terms of doing my broadcasting. That everyone's talking to me about skills. Doesn't matter if you're in retail, you're in food manufacturing, whatever it is. And one of the businesses are saying more and more to me, they want to go into schools. That I think everyone would agree you've got to start early, you've got to get in and inspire them. The difficulty is, I'm finding, because I do a lot of work with schools, there's no time in the curriculum. An event I run every year, careers event, I'm having to do on sports day, because that's the only day when they can fit me in. And this is loads of business leaders come in to talk to young people. How do we solve that problem, David? Because that's an issue, isn't it? Is getting any time in the time to actually fit into the curriculum. There's no space for careers, it feels like.
It's a really good question, Steph, and it's something we've been working on for a very long time, and I think it's one of those issues that you've always got to innovate in the way one delivers. Something we've tried, which we think has been relatively successful, is actually to create a curriculum pack and to actually offer something that's directly related to the curriculum. What that does is get you through the door in the school. But what we also initiated and have run for a number of years is a schools roadshow, where we can talk to an entire year group at one go. And because it's kind of curriculum related, it gets us through the door. And because I think there's a lot of competition for attention, isn't there? And any good marketing and communications exercise will say, keep your message really, really simple, if you possibly can. And if I can be critical of my own organisation as much as any of the others, we're all trying to sell a message. Where I think engineering construction might, and it is only might, have a slightly better message is we're talking about you can work in any of these sectors. Whereas if you've got mechanical, electrical, civil, nuclear, process, chemical, oil and gas, manufacturing, Rolls-Royce, aerospace, all going in at the same level, trying to get attention, the schools will be massively confused.
Which comes back to this idea of collaboration and joining together to sell.
Simplify the message,
yeah.
Open up career pathways, and then allow the students to make a choice. There's one point I do want to make. You asked a question about appetite amongst young people. I think Mike can underscore this, and probably Andrew can underscore this as well. We're massively oversubscribed for the apprenticeships of a technical nature that we can support. So young people are getting the agenda that a technically orientated apprenticeship offered through a credible organisation with credentials is a route to a successful career.
Yeah.
The issue is unlocking the place with the employers to get the work experience, and that's the investment that's missing.
Yeah.
And on apprenticeships, again, this is something we've heard a lot of political rhetoric around. We've created however many more apprenticeships, although, a lot of people say it's a bit of a fudge because they count level 2 and level 3 as two different people, even though two different apprenticeships, even though it might be the same person doing it. So there's things around that, and you hear so much, don't you, about apprenticeships are the way forward now. But some of the young people I talk to will say to me, oh, I can't do an apprenticeship, miss. That's for thickos. My mum wants me to go to uni. So, this is genuine conversations I've had with young people. So how do we change that? It's about parents as much as it is about students, isn't it? I mean, Andy, you probably know that.
Absolutely. I mean, we've been through all of the investments and the work that we've been doing together with EDF and the supply chain. There's been big investment in the Southwest. We're actually in a slightly different situation where we've got blue chip companies offering apprenticeship programs and the SME supply chain offering programs. And we struggled last year. We had 30 vacancies left, and this is on highly paid apprenticeship courses where young people with strong English and maths skills could go through a fully funded degree program. And I think our gap at the moment is getting the message through to schools, teachers, careers advice, and it is a limit, but most importantly, I think parents, because parents are saying, just as you say, we hear the same on the ground, and they just haven't appreciated that there are fabulous employers in the room willing to pay good salaries, and that's the SME supply chain as well. So we deliver for Abbey Wood in the MOD, that programme's oversubscribed. We deliver for Rolls-Royce Engineering, that's oversubscribed. But actually, what about Pneumatic, that make Henry the vacuum cleaners that we do all their apprenticeship for? They are struggling to fill those places, yet are equally willing to pay well and pay through HE. So I agree, I think there's a job to do with the parents as much as the young people. John?
Yes, certainly getting into schools is key, and what we're doing on a local level in Anglesey is making sure that what's being offered by Horizon, what has been offered by Magnox, is something that the actual head teachers want in their schools. And I'm building on that by having inspirational speakers actually go into these schools, and Horizon now have recently appointed Greg Evans as their Director for Operational Development. Having speakers of that calibre, they actually open up the eyes of parents to these opportunities, but also making sure that we get the stories out into the papers that this isn't an industry where the opportunities will be there maybe in 5 years' time. We need to be selling the industry very positively. And I think the other side to all of this really is about decommissioning, and really the key stuff associated with decommissioning. Via the decommissioning supply chain, local organisations are able to grow in terms of their skills and also in terms of recruiting young people. And we're in danger, I think, of getting back into a stop-start situation with decommissioning, which is an excellent supply chain for bringing people into the nuclear new build, which will be happening in the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, it's interesting you mention that, because one of the great projects that I saw at a school in Cumbria was where they were given, the A-level physics students were given practical problems from Sellafield, where they went in and they did actual practical things. I mean, like that makes a big difference, isn't it, if you can actually, get in the curriculum that way as well.
It does. I think not just in West Cumbria, but right across Cumbria, it's slightly different. We took on over 500 apprentices across Cumbria last year, and we were oversubscribed 4-1. And the number of apprentices we took on who were females was over 22%. And we're now finding young people who have got good A-levels, 390 UCAS points up to 560, straight A's and above, who are coming and wanting to do advanced and higher apprenticeships. But it's something you've got to keep working on, and we find the most effective routes are digital platforms. So, this is the digital generation, so they respond to Facebook and Twitter and all those other things, so we're constantly feeding that out all the time. But the other one is, as you say, is actually we send the apprentices, so the first year apprentices that started with us last September, we give them some additional skills to become STEM ambassadors, and we send them into the schools, and they're the ones who sell the programs to the young people. And it's very, very effective. And as you say, the more real you can make it, and we have programs where we get Sellafield graduates, they have projects in 5 weeks. One of them was called Newtbot, and we take that into schools, and it's it demonstrates real engineering that's made in a collaboration between ourselves, Sellafield, between apprentices and graduates.
Yeah. The other thing that I kind of have got a big beef about at the moment is the fact that I don't think we value skills in this country as much as we do in other countries. So, for example, in a few weeks' time, there's going to be the World Skills Championships in Brazil. A lot of people probably haven't heard of it, but basically it's where 1,200 young people from all over the world compete against each other for things like plastering, bricklaying, automation stuff, mechatronics, CAD, all kinds of vocational things, all the things, you know, the nuclear industry and lots of engineering industries need, blah, blah, blah. If you are from Japan or you're Danish, Swedish or whatever, Korean, you are a finalist, you get hot-housed for a year by someone like Hitachi, you know, Sony or whoever, and you know, they really value that, they want you to do well in this competition. If you're from the UK, you're kind of lucky if there's any coordinate, there's no big event here to find the finalists for it. And then if you win and you're from one of these countries like Sweden or wherever, you win a house and a pension.
Wow.
No, not kidding. UK, a lad who won Bricklayer of the World 2 years ago from the UK, there was embarrassingly nothing. He literally came off, he got the whole shebang of the ceremony because they treat it like the Olympics, but he walked off, and a lad I know who was there, who was from the UK, said I felt I had to go over him and give him a hug because there was no big celebration. It's not really on the, it just feels like we don't value skills as much. They're made to be quite famous, these people in those countries, and we, you know, probably half of you don't even know about this bricklayer lad. And you know, how do we solve that problem? How do we value skills more? Andy, what do you think?
Tremendously challenging, really. There's a deep sort of cultural thing, I think, within our politicians, I think, as a nation, that many people have gone through the school system, straight into a sixth form, on into university, and they've missed this whole strand of activity that's so crucial to the UK economy. If you take specifically the World Skills Agenda, you know, as a provider of further education, our friends sit in Whitehall coming up with a new dastardly scheme to give us less money to do the same, and our trainers are working weekends, evenings, extra hours, all at cost. You know, employers are needing to sort of come in behind and cover the cost and get behind that program. So it's really tricky at a grassroots level to grow people into the World Skills. So I was delighted we had a World Skills finalist go through into AutoCAD, and one of our staff was a coach within CAD. So we've been engaged with it, but it's really expensive and takes a lot of energy. So I think fundamentally we've all got a role to deliver. And I'm watching your news program, and when you mention apprenticeships, we've got to be really careful with the imagery that's happening in behind. I know there's a lot of thought, but you know, I'm hoping when apprenticeships is mentioned as a topic, it's not going to be a bricklayer or a carpenter. Let's look at someone that's working in the media industry, or as an accountant, or you know, there are so much going on. So I think there are fixed stereotypes that we've got to break down.
The last time I did apprenticeships, I did it in a fancy dress shop where they were, and then we had a KPMG apprentice and that type of thing. And I'm going to Brazil because I want to get this out there. I'm funding it myself, and I'm going to sell loads of pieces. Anyway, sorry. So John, you know, what do you think we need to do as an industry to value skills more? In
terms of valuing, I think it's actually selling and taking role models that we've got, young people that are actually succeeding. And there's nothing that creates more of an impression than actually taking young people to a power station, walking them through the car park and saying, yeah, do you want a car like that? And yes, please. Right, get a job in this industry then. Apprenticeship, appeal to the basics, the fundamentals that young people want, and show them that it's achievable. We're not selling ourselves hard enough. There is still this old concept about go to university, etc., do a course in forensic science. Maybe we need more TV programs about Sex and the Engineer or something like that, or Sex and the Apprentice, and just actually make it more interesting.
I am trying to pitch stuff like that, by the way, but not quite that title. That could get me in trouble.
We'll work on that.
We'll have a brainstorming about that afterwards. But Mike, as well, the other thing around this is, you know, is about how nuclear can take skills from other sectors. So how essentially, I mean, there's a skills problem, but how could you go about trying to nick people essentially from other areas?
Yeah, I mean, I spent 20 years in the nuclear industry before I went into training, and there is a bit of a myth and legend around nuclear. I mean, at the end of the day, what nuclear needs are, you know, good, well-rounded, educated, competent mechanical, electrical, instrumentation, commissioning engineers. And that's a common currency, as David said, right across the construction industry. And what we then do is give them the nuclear top-up. It's the same in any industry. You give them that delta that makes a difference, and it's contextualisation. But at times, I think we're our own worst enemy, because we paint this great myth about nuclear as being something different and in the past secret and things. I think we've got to debunk that, and I think it's about the industry themselves, actually realising that. I mean, the only way we're going to get the numbers David's thought of, I mean, apart from, the talent pipeline that are young people and new starters, are going to be sector jumpers from oil and gas or elsewhere. And they've got to be, indoctrinated into working in the nuclear sector. But it's not the big thing, I think, that we try to portray, to be honest.
That's a good point about the oil industry, isn't it? Because obviously I'm talking to them a lot, and a lot of people are being let go. Yeah. Are we proactively, as the nuclear industry, proactively going out there, David, to try and...
I want to come in on 2 points. One is in terms of the valuing of skills. I think just to put a plug in for the engineering construction industry, there's a massive investment in welding training, for example, and there's a huge investment. There are finalists, there's regional finalists, and it's an incredibly well-run competition. And I think for the last 2 years, representatives going to the Skill Olympics or World Skills have come from companies in the engineering construction sector. We have had a bronze, and the reward for that individual was a £250,000 career.
Oh, was it? Right.
Yeah. So.
Well, how do I not know about that?
So what? Because you haven't talked to me. But
do you talk to me?
Okay. Message understood. But in terms of the people being mobile across sectors, this is something that is of real life concern every day within the engineering construction community. And what we've done at an industry level is invest in something called the Talent Retention Solution Service, which came out of the UK government defence spending review, when there was lots of people potentially leaving the defence manufacturing industries with really high quality engineering and technical skills. Could they be redeployed elsewhere? And the engineering construction community received some of those people as it was growing. Similarly, the opposite is now available. People with skills from the oil and gas sector are now available through the pool, and then can be picked up through the growth areas in the different sectors. So we're actually actively managing that on a day-to-day basis. And in Wales, with a closure of a refinery in South Wales, we were there working with the local partners through the Talent Retention Solution Initiative to help redeploy those people elsewhere. And at a training level, between the partners on the table, on the stage, for example, we've got the cross-training solutions available to do. So the infrastructure is there, the flow pathways are potentially there, but it is always about brokering the opportunity with the availability of an individual, and that takes effort from everybody.
What about retraining of older people who've had other careers and could be people you could bring into the industry? Because we're seeing that a lot more, aren't we? People who have perhaps been made redundant from a career, or they've just come to the end of it. Someone like a police person, for example, who's done 30 years, done their lot, but still too young to stop work. Are we doing anything around that? John, have you got any thoughts on that?
I think certainly from a Welsh perspective, we're looking at what can be put in place essentially as soft top-ups. One of the great things that's happening down in the southwest is the development of the Hinkley Point Training Agency, which acts as a brokerage essentially. So we're looking towards setting something like that up in North Wales. And part of that is about sort of identifying opportunities for people, the relevant courses then that they can go on to go for these jobs. Because it's pointless actually sending somebody off in a course and there's nothing for them at the end of that course. There's nothing more motivating. So there's something for me around this about timing. I think the other bit from a Welsh perspective is the bit about actually appealing to people that have left Wales, left the UK, and actually get them to come back into the locality. I chat with a lot of sort of younger folk who would love to have the opportunity to come and work back in North Wales, but they're really looking for those opportunities. And one of the things that we're going to be doing with Welsh Government and with Horizon and Hitachi in partnership is looking to see how we can actually publicise those opportunities on a wider international basis, so that organisations in this room can benefit from that expertise.
Yeah, Andy.
Yeah, so we're actively engaged in this. I guess there's the being first to the party with Hinkley has driven the agenda for us, and we've just heard about the Hinkley Point Training Agency which links to the EDF Energy Brokerage, and we're looking to help broker people register their interests on the EDF Brokerage, understand the demand from the project, and then try and marry the two together. Early examples are things like the steel fixing program that I mentioned. Richard comes to mind, that was previously unemployed, for many years, a local guy, came through a program we'd written with Laing O'Rourke for unemployed people, a 2-week sort of immersion in the skills. You need to understand if you're happy to stand in a field and be cold and lift big pieces of steel around, it's not necessarily for everyone. But Richard found that got his attention. He's now on the block release apprenticeship program. We've developed new qualifications and standards again with Laing O'Rourke. So this is rebar that's of this sort of dimension that will be suitable for nuclear power plants. And he had a quiet word with me as he came back from his last block, where he'd come back from Manchester Metro, where he had his block program. His next one was at Crossrail, and this guy's in his mid-30s, and he's saying to me, I'm really quite nervous, Andy, because I've got to go to London. He'd never been to London. 35-year-old, never made it to London. And we're running behind these people to support them in finding accommodation, dealing with life that gets in the way of being away from girlfriends and families for the first time. But we're really kind of breaking the mould here. And Richard's on course to a fabulous new career and is looking forward to coming back to Hinckley. So lots of work going on through Brokerage, new programmes, and things that we've learned through other industries like the warehousing industry and Mulberry handbags, in terms of taking people, bringing them through short skills interventions and into employment.
Yeah, it's good to hear about him. Yeah. Would anyone like to ask a question at this point? Yes.
Hello, Rosemary Robinson, Alk Energy Resources. I wondered if you've had any experience of university technical colleges, which is getting children as young as 14 into engineering training.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to start us off on that?
Yes.
So we're part of an initiative called the Energy Coast Campus, which includes the local FE College, Lakes College, ourselves, University of Cumbria, and the Nuclear Decommissioning Agency. And a few years ago, we identified that one of the things that was missing was that link to 14-year-olds. Cut a long story short, those 4 organisations sponsored a UTC. It opened last September. When we started recruiting for it earlier on in 2014, there was a muddy field. There was no building, it's a new build. And we were trying to convince parents of the value of sending particularly their 14-year-old children to this unknown entity. It's a partnership arrangement, so there's a core building that delivers the national curriculum, 5 GCSEs, A-levels, but if they're doing engineering, they come into Gen 2 in the Energies facility, and we do the practical skills engineering. If they're doing construction, they go down to Lakes College. And it opened, 37-week build for the new building in September last year, oversubscribed, with over 20% of the applicants being females. It's had a fantastic first year. It took on 80 year 10s, so 14-year-olds for those, and 60 year 12s. And this year, second year of operation, it's been oversubscribed again. And it really has fired up the imagination of parents in particular, because they now see a clear pathway of progression from university, from school through either apprenticeships or into HE. And the kids love it. I mean, these kids work at 8:30 in the morning till 5 o'clock at night day. They don't do any homework afterwards. Everything's in the school day. They have shorter school holidays, and that way you can actually get 2 years extra education from 14 to 18. And they absolutely love it. We've now got the employers coming in, we've got Sellafield, we've got Morgan Sindel, we've got a local company called Igison piling in, because we're talking about school engagement. This is a school that just opens its arms to companies coming in, working with the kids, giving them real projects, taking them down to the plant, taking them down to the factory, showing what it's like to be doing real engineering or real construction. So for us, obviously, it's been a success. Not all UTCs have, I have to say. I think that's a lot about the partnership and the model behind them. But it's one of the best things we've ever done, quite frankly.
Yeah, David.
Our approach is slightly different in terms of UTC engagement, but we're concentrating mostly with those as partners in terms of delivering higher apprenticeships, particularly. So, because I think bearing in mind, I should say, we're in a position of sort of working with partners nationally across the UK, We've got something like 200 approved providers who work to our standards, and a good proportion of those are delivering apprenticeships with our support and in partnership. And we thought that system was relatively well established, and therefore looking to UTCs, we've looked at those for perhaps the higher level apprenticeships, and we've gone into partnership again with 4 across the UK to do higher apprenticeships in and around the engineering construction piece, but obviously at the high level as a deliberate pathway towards university routing as well. So it is, it's still relatively early days in my view, so whether that will be a really successful model, but we're supporting it.
John, did you want to add to that?
Just that, from a Welsh perspective, UTC is something completely alien. We don't have them in Wales, unfortunately. However, what we are doing, something very similar in some senses, in that actually encouraging 14-year-olds to be following engineering courses. For example, in Anglesey, we've got schools now offering engineering at age 14, where the youngsters go off to Coleg Menai and do 2 years, essentially, about, I think it's 3 hours a week, on following a GCSE qualification. That then takes them on either into an apprenticeship or into following an engineering course in the 6th form, with opportunities going on then into higher education. What's great about it is that it has the support of the local employers, of Horizon, of Magnox and of others, so that these youngsters actually get industry experience as well, and see that it is actually fun to do engineering.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi there, Emma Jane. I run a nuclear-only recruitment business based in Cumbria, and I would like to pick up on Mike's point with regards to the perception that nuclear is something very, very special. And regardless of the fact that you're a chartered engineer, if you don't have nuclear experience, therefore you haven't got a place in the nuclear market. Now, we've actually been very successful in educating a number of our clients, including Low-Level Waste Repository, in the fact that nuclear isn't that essential and the skills are what are more important. I also wanted to pick up your point about oil and gas. Obviously at the moment there are a number of oil and gas people trying to enter into the market, and the problem we are having is salary expectation. And I think that is a real problem. In our industry, a project engineer 35k, in their industry it's 65. So it's a huge difference. So something needs to be addressed with regards to salary expectation and how we can get the balance right, and how we can educate the nuclear industry that it is the education and the skills that is important, not the industry experience.
Yeah, I'm hearing spend big words being said in my head as well. Again, David.
I'd like to sort of pick up on the second of your questions and leave Mike to do the first bit, if I may. On the oil and gas, I absolutely get the point that salary expectations can be very, very high. In my conversation with the employers in that community, that one of the issues is that industry has actually employed a lot of people on agency contracts or self-employed contractor status, and that has actually driven the rates high. And whilst the oil price was high, it could be afforded. That industry right now is telling me that they've got to take out 40% of their operating costs and their project delivery costs. Otherwise, oil and gas in the North Sea will not be economic. So I think we're having a market correction. And I think it will take time for the expectations to be moderated downwards. But a job opportunity when there's no job opportunity is got to be a big incentive for certain people at any rate. But I absolutely take the point with you. And I applaud what you're doing in terms of educating that nuclear is not that special per se. Should dare not say that in this room, I guess. But I'm a physicist, so I can say this. Though. Most of a nuclear power station is a conventional power station. There's bits right at the centre of it, the reactor. One thing I didn't say earlier on is actually in the pharmaceutical industry, they call their things reactors too. So even the language is the same in pharmaceutical. So if we can be more open and more flexible, then we'll actually have a much more productive workforce for the future.
Did you want to pick up on anything, Mike, or you?
I take Emma's point. I think that's changing, and it's changing for pragmatism. The reality is the nuclear industry is a small industry. It almost feels like a family. You meet the same people, and we're all getting older as well. So I think for a while now, there's been a recognition that, I said right at the beginning, you need good engineers, good craft, good technicians, and what the industry needs to do is the right programs to do the transition, but give the nuclear delta, particularly around safety and human performance, because that's absolutely key, particularly to new build.
Yeah, and you mentioned people, getting older, and that's part of the problem with skills in nuclear, isn't it? It's kind of top heavy, if that expression works, in the sense of, lots of people are going to retire soon and take those skills with them. Do you think there's enough being done to make sure those people retiring are getting those skills spread amongst the new people coming in?
No. There's a huge issue about knowledge transfer, and the best knowledge transfer I've ever seen is where you actually bring in new younger people and you put them with the older people before they retire. Too often they retire and you've lost them. If you're lucky, you can get them back. Part of my job is actually getting people who used to work in the industry back into Gen 2 to actually train on, pass that knowledge on. But we don't do that well as an industry, and we don't do it systematically enough.
I absolutely agree with what Mike's saying. I think just to sort of come in there, this is a contracting industry, and people get paid, or remuneration is driven by selling of man hours to do work. And so selling of man hours to the customer is actually the currency of our industry, and that doesn't promote easy behaviour. People who are not being recovered, their costs are not being recovered, it's really difficult for the employers. And the industry does generally think about training as a cost as opposed to an investment. So there's a mindset issue there. But by and large, I think the issues are quite transparent. Not transparent, quite simple to identify. The solution is more difficult to implement.
Okay, so just to wrap things up, we could go on about this for hours, couldn't we? But we've run out of time, unfortunately. Just to wrap things up, can each of you kind of give me what, if you obviously all care about skills, what would you say to people out there in the supply chain or in the industry generally about what they could do to try and help the skills thing? A kind of summary, really, to conclude on what could they be doing?
I think a lot of good work is happening, and I think that picking up on David's theme to begin with, it's about coming together and collaborating and understanding that we together need to form a workforce that will, over its life, move between different employers in the room and different organisations. But I think we need to understand that that's a common investment that we need to make, and there's some really interesting initiatives coming out. There's a new national college for the nuclear industry being formed as we speak, and Bridgewater is very pleased to be playing a part in that. But that initiative will only work if we can all work together on it and drive a common curriculum, and I think it could be a solution to many of the issues that are out there. So think of skills as investment and look to work together and find initiatives where you can do so.
John?
Absolutely. Collaboration is key for taking all of this forward, and invest now. Take on more people than you actually need at this moment in time. That's a terrible thing to say to a business, but unless that happens, there will not be enough people in 5 years' time for taking things forward.
So take the burden of the cost now.
Take the burden now.
Mike?
Yeah, I agree with all above, and echoing, Tom Sanson's comment yesterday about, do it early and spend big. But one thing I would ask employers, the education supply side works to a different timetable than normal business. And if we're going to build new facilities, if they're not ready by the September of the year they're required, and we miss that boat, it isn't just a few months slippage, it's another 12 months. So it's absolutely crucial and key now to do early planning, early intervention and early thinking about skills, because when you get into it, you may lose at least one academic year, if not two. We just work on a different timetable from business.
Yeah, final word with you, David.
Trying to find something to add of meaning to what my colleagues have just said, which I absolutely underscore 100%. This industry does projects, and it's doing nuclear projects, it's doing power station projects. If we can adapt our thinking so that we do people as projects where the industry unites to a common plan for delivering skills, then we will deliver.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you all very much for your time this afternoon. We could go on about that for ages, couldn't we? Let's give the panel a round of applause there. Thank you.